Get to the church blind! Get to the church blind! Go! Now!
I'm Pete Mitchell, and he's Peyton Jones, and you're listening to Hardcore Church Planning, the companion podcast for the Church Planner Podcast and Church Planner Magazine. Each week, we'll bring you interviews from planners who are in the trenches making it happen right now. These active church planners bear it all, share their successes, their failures, and what they'd wish they'd known when they were first starting out. Listen in to discover how God is working in their church plant.
Have you ever had to prep a sermon and you just looked at your bookshelf and you didn't have enough of what you needed? Well, you don't have to do that. Go to logos.com. Logos Bible software has everything that you need at pretty much at your fingertips, because you're literally typing stuff in, and with a click of a mouse button, you can open the entire C.H. Spurgeon library. You can look up original languages, word studies. I mean, this thing is like the Lollapalooza of church planning information. You can have a little mini concert in your sermon prep right there. All the greats kind of gathered around and picking their brains and putting them into your sermon. And you want to check out logosbiblesoftware.com. They'll actually make you look smarter than you actually are.
Hey, church planner, welcome back to Hardcore Church Planning. I wish I had a cool tagline like, the hardcorest of church planning, hardcore church planners, but I don't. You know what the deal is here. It's just, me and another dude, sometimes another chick. Hey, I'm from a beach community. Give me a break. Having a conversation about all things related to church planning. And sometimes they don't seem related at the outset, straight out the gate. But, if you give a little bit of time, you'll see the connection. Today, my guest is Jeremy Martin. Jeremy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a church planter in downtown Las Vegas, where my wife and partner in ministry and our family have decided to create space to discuss life and faith with people. And so we love Las Vegas, love our city, and we also are passionate about helping people. With church planting. I am passionate about the church, just the church in general, and helping the church. And so I love these conversations.
Very cool, man. Well, hey, let's talk about kind of the theme of today's call, which you kind of threw a bug in my ear, and I really like the sound of it. You and I were having another conversation. And you threw out the term holacracy. Now, I get easily distracted by bright, shiny objects and big words. And it was a big word. It was like holacracy. And I was like, dude, what's that? And you were like, man, this thing is buzzing me right now. When you unpacked it a bit, I'm like, okay, we need to talk about that. So I'm a huge leadership. Let's put it this way. Leadership can be like this really weird distraction from ministry to a certain degree. Like, everybody's going to this leadership conference and reading this leadership book and Lencioni and yada, yada, yada. And for me, I'm like, hey, that's cool. That's great. Fine, geek out on. But when you kind of said, hey, holacracy, it connected to a lot of stuff that I'm already passionate about. So kind of break it down for us. What is holacracy?
So simply put, holacracy is a radically new way to organize power within organizations. And that's what it really comes down to, is who has the power, where do they have that, and how do we organize that within our structure of how we do business or whatever. And, for me, when I heard that, when I started to explore it, I thought to myself of all the church situations I was in, with abuse of power or consolidation of power or lack of empowerment to the people of the church. And just thought to myself, maybe this is a radically new way to approach this. And maybe there's some wisdom in it for the church.
Well, it's kind of something that I love. And basically it's this, that we are going into a time, I think, in the church. And it's funny, the church has always done this. We've always been looking at leadership. We've always been looking at structure. The church is, I would say, before Constantine, during Constantine, after Constantine, during the Puritans, during the Reformation, during the Wesleyan movement into the 18th century, into, the fragmentation of, the Victorian age and, the rise of the Baptists and the this and the that. I mean, we have been talking about structure and power and hierarchy and all these things. And of course, I wrote this little book. I would say today, people are looking back at Ephesians 4, looking at distribution of power. And right now we're coming into this age where we're shifting our economy from a consumer to a creator. I wish I were smart enough to come up with that. I heard that from Brian Sanders, and it made me think we're in this age of YouTube. We're in this age of everybody kind of going into their own, calling, finding their own ability to create and be the gatekeepers. And perhaps this holacracy idea is kind of hardwired into the kingdom of God. And we're just starting to talk about it and rediscover it. What do you think?
Yeah, well, so when I look at it, so when it was first introduced to me, one of the things, the way holacracy, it doesn't tell you how to run your organization. It simply gives you the tools and the structure. It's kind of like a software to run on top of your operating system, that you can add apps to, and all this kind of stuff that you can really mold. And you can really be agile with. You can make rapid iterations, all those things. And Carrie Newhoff from Canada has a lot of leadership things on about future church and how those are necessary things for the future of church, because technology is moving things faster. But the thing that got me was actually one of the oldest church-related things that I found wisdom in holacracy, and that was this. Changes are made and structurally, so the governance of the church is made based on felt tension. And tension is not a bad word, it's a good word here. It is that space between what is and what could be in the way that who's accountable for certain things, the roles of the church, who's doing what work and what work needs to be done. And it's this idea of this felt need. And the church actually did this right after Jesus. They were so passionate about when Jesus said, love each other like I've loved you, that the apostles, they were teaching and they were leading, but they were also serving so much that some things were actually dropping through the cracks. And the outside world started to have a bad reputation because they weren't taking care of their widows. And they called a meeting, right? And these apostles are here, and I don't know how the whole church was there or what exactly they looked at, but they called the meeting. They said this: we have to do what we have to do, and we need to create a new role to do this thing that needs to be done. This being slipped through the crack. This is the work that I can't do. And what they did was they created this role of deacon, and they empowered those people. They filled those roles with people. They empowered that role to lead the serving and the outreach arm, if you will, of the early church in that area. And then they created a very clear accountabilities for the apostles. Said, here's what we're doing, and then here's what the deacons are doing. And a lot of times what we have done in the past is take that example and go, yeah, so then you have pastors on top, and you have deacons down below, and then you have the people underneath that, and there's this structure. Or sometimes the deacons even hold some power over the elder board, depending on what tradition you're in, where the pastor's on staff answers to the deacons, and it all kind of got mixed up somewhere along the way. But it wasn't about a hierarchy. It was about empowering new people to do the work that needed to be done, that God had given them with the people, and using maybe their giftedness, maybe their availability, but it energizing this new role with people in the church, and it not being all about one person. And they did it as a group, and I'm sure they had a process. And the same thing with holacracy. It provides a very clear process of accountabilities and roles. And it doesn't tell you how to do what you do. It just gives you a way to do it in a much more clear, transparent, power distributed way. So I don't delegate power to our team. I've distributed it, which means this. When they come to me, they have an idea, and they ask me, what should I do here? I go, what do you think? That is your authority. And that is a paradigm shift for many, many church leaders. And certainly for a church planter, a lot of times when church planners start, they're doing it all. They're the catch-all.
Right.
And I decided that would be very unhealthy for me. And so we got some people around us and gave them significant work to do and empowered them to do it themselves and to bring that to the kingdom of God.
So as a church planner, I'll tell you, over the years, I mean, I've been in ministry a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Started at a mega church with the power structures, and nobody sees the wizard. Everything's done in a dark back room somewhere, and the show must go on. And so people receive the announcements of everything, and that's how we've typically run things over the years, and as church, right?
Yep.
But when you become a missionary church planner, you're working in smaller contexts. Your team is more like a family, and you're all of a sudden you're having these conversations like, why are our wives not here? Why is a bunch of dudes sitting around talking? Does Paul not include the women? The women also have qualified. Like, why are we trying to do this as dudes? And so you start. That's the first thing that starts to change, because my wife was a missionary. She's serving, and I'm like, yeah. So boom. But then you start going, well, why are we like this elite that's sitting in here, not talking to anyone else, not considering anybody else gifting or calling or desires or ability, and yet we're trying to say that we're going to move together, and we're trying to, if you listen to church structure, it's like you're trying to sell people on what they need to do. And you'll hear people talk about vision casting, buy-in, whoa. Where did we get this from? Right? It comes from a consumer business model.
Yes.
Of the bottom line is to make a bunch of money, and everybody needs to get behind the company's goal to make this money. Whereas this, for me, I came into years ago something called gift-driven ministry, where I got tired of the 5-year plan, and I said, hey, what is the Holy Spirit? Who's He put around me? He's put these gifts on my core team. That's going to determine what direction I go. And that was a reverse engineering for me of mission.
Right.
And I talk about it in Church Zero. Cha-ching. Sorry, I'm not supposed to talk about my book here. But we're not talking about your book. So, but the reality is that was a shift, and that it literally started something that I am still working through, because it keeps going deeper and deeper with every church plant. I find it's the gift. It was just the tip of the iceberg of seeing others empowered and equipped and raised up and deployed. And
and one of the things that I've learned, and actually sitting in this training all week, I was with business people. We are the lone church that has adopted this and operating in it fully. I was the lone church person, sitting in a room full of business people. What I realized is the same dynamics are going on underneath the surface in every kind of organization. I found a lot of biblical spiritual wisdom with it. It's the way it gives space to people, the way it encourages you to energize people and encourages people to significant work, to own the responsibility, but also what I found is true is a fundamental distrust of people across the board in working in organizations. It's the idea of everyone seemed to trust themselves as we were working through tensions and how this made people feel as they worked through this training. Everyone seemed to trust themselves when it came to self-management. They didn't trust everybody else on their team in self-management. They didn't trust that they were going to consider the work as seriously as they did, or they weren't going to be as good at it as they were. And in church world, it's the same thing. I think pastors and people who maybe go to school to lead church in some significant way just feels like I'm qualified, and so they can help me out, but they're not qualified to actually give them authority. And then certainly we wouldn't work it into a structure where the lead pastor actually literally signs over his authority to this constitutional governance that is purpose driven, and abdicate authority over the whole thing. Now you still have authority within your roles, but you're abdicating the authority over the whole thing. And what I realized that does is this whole process has really revealed how mistrusting people can be of other people on their team. Right. And within the church, you would think that you would go, hey, these are people who are on the same path I'm on. They're in this community with me. I should trust them. I need to trust them.
Right.
If we're going to do this significant work, I can't do it all myself. I've got to trust them. And that was very difficult for me. I'm not going to lie. This was not always a comfortable transition.
Right.
But when I realized that there's a way to plug people in.
Jeremy, give me a story of, kind of a way in which you have really let out this way. What's been give us an example of a way on your personal team where you're like, okay, I'm making this shift. This is what it looks like.
Yeah. So when we sat down as a team and we kind of figured out roles and things like that, there's several different stories. And I'll give one negative, or at least it would seem like a negative. So we were having one of our early meetings and the church had just launched. I want to say it was even the day we launched officially on Sunday. We had a governance meeting that night with our team, and we had a pastor from out of town that their church is kind of our lone church support, on a consistent basis. And he was interested to sit in this meeting, and so we're having this meeting, and someone brought up our values that we have, our outward-facing values of the church, which are give generously, commit courageously, those kinds of things. And they wanted to rework them because they're like, we have these, but they don't reflect us yet. And I think we should be on the lookout for what values emerge from us in our gatherings and those things. Now, I knew something, and I was exhausted that day. I knew this person could ask those questions in this meeting. They could talk about this. They could express their tension. But ultimately, in the governance that was currently established, and that is really one of the immovable rules, they couldn't change that outward-facing values, right, that were established with the church. But I didn't protest. It wasn't my turn to speak. It was all done very orderly, and I let this person speak and share this with the group and talk about this. And then the next day, that really bothered that pastor, and so he was worried that this system allowed for anyone to just hijack the church, right, hijack the mission, vision, values, and hijack the organization. And so we sat with our holacracy consultants at the time, and he asked about that, and I let him just ask him about what this is, and he just expressed that this isn't the rules. Like, that person has the opportunity to ask and to question and to get information on it and all those kinds of things and get thoughts and feelings, but that authority lied within a role very clearly. And as soon as that person, they were also in that meeting, they went, oh, that's that role. Oh, that accountability already belongs to that role and that role's purpose. Okay, cool. Never mind then. And so it was one of those things that was really hard and awkward at first, but it was actually really brilliant because this person got clarity on whose role it was to do those things. And then I'll say one from even last week, I made a passing comment about a tablecloth that was wrinkled at our gathering. I said, oh, you know what? I used to have like a handheld steam iron thing. I didn't like ironing, so I would steam my shirts, when I was a single man. And I was like, that might actually work for this. And it was just in passing, kind of laughing, haha. But the person in that role that energized that role for guest services immediately went home after the gathering, got on Amazon Prime, and they're set up on our business account to spend money. They know how much money they have to spend, and they spent it without any approval from me. They didn't go to our accountant. They didn't go to anything. Why? Because they had the authority to affect their role in their work in any way they see fit. And budget is a parameter, but they knew how much money they had. They knew how much they had spent.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because just hearing this, this is a very small thing that you're mentioning, and yet most of our church planners listening right now, they would have been the person to go online and to buy that, because they would have been in control of the church's budget, finances, this and that, and everything bottlenecks with the pastor buying signs. I wonder how many of you guys out there, you wanted signs, and it was this big task. You had to find someone who made the signs. You had to research the giant. Then you had to go get the logo. Then you had to, and what you're kind of saying is, hey, we give people that role and we say, run with it. Now, I'll be honest, like, this was something that I learned on the job as a church planner, because I began to see what things I was good at and what things I wasn't good at.
Right.
And I would I'll never forget planning in Long Beach and having a guy named Charlie, who was my co-planner. He said to me at one point, because I said, hey, I made this and I made that and I did this. And he goes, hey, that's cool. But he goes, I don't think Peyton Jones ought to be spending, he goes, how long did it take you? About 4 hours.
Right.
I don't think Peyton Jones ought to be spending 4 hours in front of the computer screen having to do that. He goes, brother, we got other people in church that can do that. And it's freeing to hear. I already knew that, but I think most of us, that's what we do. And so I love the fact that the interesting thing is I researched holacracy a little bit before this, is it's something that it becomes intuitive and intrinsic in the necessity of church planning eventually. Whereas this is a system. It's kind of like it's a system of almost like a structure for it that someone's mapped out and thought about and said, here's a new system, operate this way, thank me later.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's a radically new way to organize power. Now, I'll be honest, not every leader is in a place where they're willing to give away power to that structure and to that system. And I mean, to literally sign it away. One of the things I did in our discovery session with our team was I had to out loud, for the purposes of the 2-day discovery session, say out loud to the team that I am now, as founder, pastor, founder, planter, whatever language you want to use, I am now abdicating my authority. I'm giving it to this Constitution, and we're going to operate as a team with that. And I don't get to come in and just run roughshod over anybody. As a matter of fact, I don't even get to facilitate meetings in the organization that I founded because of a role that I hold.
Right.
Isn't allowed to be elected as a facilitator in meetings.
Well, how weird is this, man? Like, I planted a church, I handed it over to a team, and now I can make suggestions, but I'm not,
right.
I have no authority in that church, And here's the thing is, I think for me, when you're saying this is resonating, this is why holacracy resonated with me to begin with, is because for me, I made that shift, not to a constitution, but to Jesus. And it, as soon as you go to team leadership, you say, I am one amongst equals.
Yep.
And none of us is running this show. Christ is running it. Our job is to listen. And that's one aspect. That's like the first step of it, to listen to him.
And to listen and to feel out and to notice when something feels off.
Right.
That means something can be better.
Right.
And how many times in a church structure is that thing that feels off just hidden until someone leaves the staff, and then maybe it gets, you know what I mean, or it gets blown up, or someone that gets angry at someone. But instead, what if we just trusted these people that we love and who are adults and who a lot of times are really good in all kinds of aspects of the community, to feel what could be different in our organization, to sense it, and then give them a very clear-cut process on how to process their tension to reach a resolution that works for everyone and doesn't cause the organization harm. It's actually one of the questions: is this proposal going to cause us harm or move us backwards? If not, then let's move forward with it and let's grow together. And it is a team thing in a sense, but it's also this individual responsibility to energize my role, and the empowerment of that. It's a different kind of leadership.
Yeah.
It is not this top-down leadership. It is this reaching out next to you leadership and putting someone in a role. And honestly, the way people have stepped up, our biggest skeptics. We have a guy on our team, Ern, and he actually worked for a large company that implemented this. He left the company at that time. He was very skeptical because all of his former coworkers were really negative about it. It was a shift that was really difficult for people to wrap their mind around in a large company. And he was skeptical when we started doing this. He's probably our biggest fan. He's probably the biggest fan of meetings. We're high-fiving when meetings are done. And I mean like governance meetings where we just added a role or an accountability to a role or a policy. I mean, who high-fives after implementing a policy? Well, we did it together, and we feel good about it. And we're excited about what it's going to do for our effectiveness, again, to the purpose of what we're doing. And our purpose is to help people follow Jesus into new life. Jesus gave us that purpose, right? Making disciples, however you want to word it. And the whole organization is going after that purpose. And so Jesus sits atop of it and actually outside of it, because He's not just ours, right? He's
Right.
all the churches, and he sits atop of it through the purpose, and we follow that, and we trust the Spirit of God in every person, that when they feel that thing that's not right, and they bring it to the table, we could process that in a meaningful, a very human, elevating way, in a loving way. And that's where some of the real wisdom in this is. I don't get to just shut someone down as the pastor of the church because I don't like their idea. They get to be heard, and they get to make the changes necessary for them to do their role that we distributed to them.
I think it's healthy. As soon as you start kind of saying, well, maybe I hand away the responsibility laterally to those that are called to lead with me. Now I need to listen to the one leading us as a team. Mm-hmm. Then the next step becomes, like all things, as soon as you go, if you love the Lord your God, you love your neighbors yourself. As soon as you begin to listen to how to be led, then you start listening to those you lead. And yes. I think that, that's really, it's funny because like with my first church plant in Wales, mm-hmm. I was learning the first part of Ephesians 4:10 and 11, which was God gave some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers.
Right.
The next major shift for me, and Reaching the Unreached talks about it a lot, cha-ching, and that was to equip the saints. And this is what holacracy, for me, my understanding of it so far is about equipping and giving yes. people ownership, giving people the ability to say, this isn't just my gifting, this is also my calling. And you're mm-hmm. releasing me in my calling. And that energizes me. That gives me, it's like if I came away and I said, hey, here's the 5 things I want you to do. I want you to, do these 5 tasks. It all has to do with this aspect of church ministry versus saying, hey, here's your role. You make it whatever it needs to be. Yes. And it's empowering. It's exciting. You're allowed to use your creativity. Every once in a while you come across a person that's too scared and timid and says, I need you to tell me exactly because there's fear of performance and fear
right.
of failure.
Oh, yeah. And again, there's ways within holacracy to work around all that, to coach that. We actually, there's roles within our organization that develops the leaders, the people that own roles. And we call those are our partners. Those are our core partners. These are people who agree to a level of ownership, and to ongoing work within the organization. But you coach that. You always want that. Sometimes people are more available than they are capable, but they're able to learn. You give them the resources, you give them the freedom, you give them the boundaries. That's another thing that the Constitution of holacracy does very clearly is it's the rules to the game.
Right.
And when you know what you can and cannot do, you actually have a freedom within that. That's
yes.
really beautiful.
I agree.
And so we love that. And again, meaningful work, and not always the way I would do it. I'd like to give you one more story of kind of how this worked in a way that I think a lot of people who, especially in a small church, maybe a new church, but certainly in every church will understand this. We had an instance where someone who had been serving on a team, and we have a role in our gathering circle that is music. And so someone who had been serving on the team that this musician on our team organizes, one of his volunteers, had a problem with the way he, organized like practices or something like that, just logistical things, and had some real problems with it. Thought we could, things should be better and this and that. And so they went to him. He said, "Listen, this is kind of for me. I'm in this role, and this is the best way for me to accomplish this role right now, currently." And she didn't like that answer, so she went to other people, and then she went to someone else, and then she went to someone else, and eventually she didn't get the answer she wanted. She came to me, and that's pretty typical in a hierarchical system, right? You go around the people and you try to find out who really makes these decisions. And she came to me and she expressed her problem and said, "Well, did you go to him and talk to him about it?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Well, okay. Did he say anything or do anything wrong? Right? I want to make sure that you weren't mistreated or anything like that." She said, "No, I just disagree." And I'm like, "Okay, well, he empowers that role. I actually don't have the authority to change anything or to ask him to do anything or to tell him to do anything different. And she goes, yeah, that's what everyone keeps telling me. And I realized something huge right there is the clarity that this had brought and the freedom that had brought. We didn't have any issues on our core team with gossip or backbiting or politicizing or trying to work around. Everyone just went, you know what? That's his authority. We couldn't if we wanted to. So why would we even try? Right? And it was this thing where a lot of churches, especially early on, can be brought down by people trying to work a system with the loopholes and all these workarounds and this and that. And when everyone honored the system, now they could have still gone around it, sure, in ways, or at least tried to. But when everyone honors the system, the person who owns that role is honored. And they are respected and they are empowered even more. And you know what? That person who was dissatisfied left. They left the church plant. And when you're a church plant and you have a key volunteer, someone who feels like pretty committed, and they leave, that hurts. And then they take their kids with them, whatever. And then they might tell other people, right, who then might leave. Like that hurts. You recognize it when you're small and when you're new and it's year one. But I was so excited for our team. And we celebrated, because what gets celebrated gets repeated. We celebrated the fact that we honored our role filler at that time and his authority within that. And we celebrated him holding to his ability to say, thank you, you've been heard, I understand that, but the best way for me currently to fill this role is for us to do it this way. And to me, it was like, I don't know how often that happens, and happens because of the system that is in place actually prevents the gossip, or at least enhances the humanity of it and the love and the considering of your neighbor. It was a pretty big moment for us with Holacracy, because she literally had gone to everyone else and I was the last one. And she said everyone had told her the exact same thing. He owns the role. That's his authority. And even the pastor, the founder, the church planter, the guy talking, said the same thing and honored that. I didn't even tell her that I would do it exactly the same way he did it. Didn't need to. Right. Though I would. Right. I didn't need to say that. All I needed to say was, that's his authority. And it was a real light bulb moment for our team. And it meant a lot to the person filling that role as well.
Right. Very cool. Well, hey, man, look, I appreciate you sharing this with us and with our people, and it's definitely something. You guys can check out a book. It's called Holacracy. Who's the author of that book again?
So that's Brian Robertson. I actually just talked to him just a few minutes before we jumped on this call here at the training, and letting him know about the innovative ways we're doing that. And he signed my copy of the book, actually, which was cool. Brian Robertson and Holacracy 1. I get calls regularly from churches who if you search Church Holacracy, an article I wrote comes up. I believe that article should be in Church Planner Magazine, coming up here soon as well.
That's right.
And so if anyone wants to talk about it in depth, I actually have these conversations often this year, a lot of traffic around this. And I'm willing to help people with some ideas. I can't currently, sell services, if you will. I'm working towards the licensing with some of this information, and to be able to serve the church better with this. Yeah. And to provide.
Where can they keep up with you so that when that day comes, they can reach out to you and say, hey, man, walk me through this?
Absolutely. So anything with our church, the handle is at DTLV Faith or at JMART316, JMART316 on the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of that. And you can also email me at Jeremy, Jeremy, at DTLVfaith.com. I'd be happy to just discuss this, what it looks like. And it's a conversation I love to have.
Okay, well, sounds good, man. Hey, thank you so much for your time. You've been listening today to Hardcore Church Planning. If you've appreciated what you've heard and you want to throw us a little love, then go ahead and write us an Amazon review. Write us an Amazon review on my books, of course, and Apple review on the podcast. And definitely get in touch with Mr. Jeremy Martin. And with that, thanks for joining us today for Hardcore. Arnold, sign us out.
Remember, if you are called to church planting, go hardcore or go home.
Hey, I want to give a big shout out to our number one sponsor. They've been with us for years. I know them personally. The founder is Josh Henry. He is an ex-church planner. If you wonder why we have so much fun with SimplifyChurch.com's ads, it's simply because we love these guys. We believe in them. I have used them. Gosh, as a church planner, I found them and have been using them for donkey's years. And if you don't know, that means a really long time. So head on over to SimplifyChurch.com. They're going to help you do all the stuff that you need to do, but nobody taught you to do in seminary. Things like bookkeeping, payroll, dealing with the IRS, making sure you're compliant, sending end-of-year donor receipts. If you haven't done that yet, 'tis the season. You have until the end of January to get those out to your people. So make sure you head on over to SimplifyChurch.com and let them simplify your church.
You've been listening to Hardcore Church Planning. Hardcore Church Planning has been brought to you by the Church Planner Podcast and the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the App Store for both Apple and Android devices. If you like this episode, leave us a positive review. If you didn't like this episode, we'll be happy to give you your money back.